Hi, my name is Erin Nelson, and this is my presentation for single case design ABA 641 on the impact of technological screen time rewards on peer conflicts and observation in children ages 8 through 12. So some of the background information or previous research that has been done on this topic include researchers that have measured screen time, so computer, TV use, mobile device use, and that impact on physiological and psychological health in children. A lot of the research has been used to make recommendations for limiting screen time for children, especially recommendations to parents. A lot of it was based around correlation with aggressive and depressive behaviors, and then correlation with inattentive behaviors, decreased executive functioning skills, impulse control, task persistence, and emotional regulation. In particular, some of those studies that were of interest to me were those that looked at kind of the aggressive behaviors, the impulse control, emotional regulation is what I was looking at for my study. So in terms of excessive screen time for children ages birth to 18, it's kind of a little bit of a subjective term. Excessive screen time was really listed anywhere between 7 to 10 hours a day for children. There is kind of a guideline from the American Academy of Pediatrics only for preschool age children, but gives a guideline of no more than 2 hours a day for preschool age children. And then there isn't really any guidelines after that. But some of the impacts that they found of excessive screen time for kids were disturbances in sleep for a multitude of reasons. So anywhere from, seeing something that was excessively stimulating and kind of like kept kids from going to sleep, to having that blue screen on their eyes late at night, and just kind of feeling more stimulated, having access to mobile devices when they're supposed to be sleeping was causing some sleep disturbances, cardiovascular impacts. So lack of exercise due to excessive time in front of a television or a computer, inability to regulate stress, seeing a lot of addictive type behavior with technology and screen time. And then there was a case study done on ADHD-like behaviors where screen time was actually contributing to more ADHD behavior in kids who had not actually been diagnosed with ADHD, but saw a decrease with a decrease of screen time. And then obesity as well, in terms of impacts on children from screen time. So part of what I wanted to look at is how do we continue to develop positive social interactions, and why is that important for children, especially in a school where they're learning presumably how to interact with their peers in positive ways. And so some of the research that was talking about what's the importance of positive social interactions, some of them said social success indicators were things like ease of finding and keeping friends, feeling accepted and understood by peer group, being able to report that they have a close group of friends that give them support. And the studies, in fact, found that screen-addicted youth, or youth that had excessive access to screen time, reported less social support from their peers and their family. Face-to-face communication was highly correlated with positive social well-being. And then in some neurological studies actually found that addictive screen time behavior can actually make some changes to the frontal lobe structure, which in turn can cause some difficulty focusing on relevant information in some situations, as well as decrease coping skills with complicated task demands. So areas that I found that were lacking in research, I did not find any behavior analytic research. There were no single case designs as far as I could find. Everything else was done mostly with survey data, somewhat uncontrolled studies. A lot of the research that I read had really unclear definition and parameters of what the behaviors were. So they might say, we're measuring too much arguing, but never gave a definition of what that would look like or who would determine what that was. And a lot of the survey report data was secondary, so caregivers reporting on their child's behaviors. And obviously, that's a secondhand account of what is happening. And then I didn't find any major studies that were done of the impact of technology use at school. So technology in schools is pretty common. And I think one of the reasons that I wanted to take a look at this is that I have seen across multiple settings in schools and centers that I've worked at that technological breaks and rewards are commonly used as high-level reinforcement tools in schools. Kids really want access to screen time. They really enjoy, for whatever reason, like watching YouTube. I don't know if anybody else has noticed this, but gosh, do they love to watch other kids play games. But I mean, any multitude of things that they can do on a screen, that's really a high reinforcer for them. And frankly, we can get kids to do quite a lot of work or quite a lot of things, preferred activities for them to receive that kind of reward. I've also witnessed many times difficulty ending technology breaks and trying to get the child re-engaged again. So once they receive that reward or once they receive that break, what is how likely are we to kind of be able to get them back re-engaged in an academic task or in something that we want them to do aside from that break in an efficient manner. Also has the potential to pulse other students off task. So there's one child might see, like they're playing the iPad, maybe a peer goes over and starts ignoring directions from the teacher because they can, even though they're not doing it themselves, can watch somebody else do a reinforcing behavior. And anecdotally, what I've noticed is, allowed screen time access or access to technology, even when they're doing something that is academic, like a lot of kids might sneak and like be playing a game, and then as soon as the teacher comes over, pretends to be, writing on a paper or something like that. So has the possibility of really drawing kids off task, decreasing their motivation for the task at hand when it's available. So my research question is, I'm studying the rate of occurrence of peer conflict in children ages 8 to 12 who are provided daily access to technological breaks and rewards, so using iPads, tablets, computers, Chromebooks, even mobile phones during school hours. And the question is, does limiting access to technology rewards during the school day correlate with a decrease in peer conflict behavior? So just a quick definition of peer conflict, and I'll go into more depth with this later. But I define peer conflict as engagement in behavior such as name-calling, verbal aggression, physical altercations, stealing or grabbing, and yelling. For my research design, I determined after much going back and forth that I did want to use a multiple baseline design for this study. So in the baseline condition, students will basically have access to technology as per usual. So what that would mean for the study is that they would have access to technological break times and rewards as kind of deemed acceptable by the teacher or any staff that are in the room. In the treatment condition, staggering of removing that technological break time and reward will be removed across the children in the study. So selection criteria for my study. Sure, there's 4 kids. 4 students are identified. They're fake kids. They'd be within a public school in a special education classroom between the ages of 8 through 12. And because I do work primarily within an EBD room, emotional behavioral disorder, I made this kind of around what I see day to day. So they would have an educational disability label of emotional behavioral disorder or autism spectrum disorder. One other parameter they set for this research was that it would include only setting 3 students. So what that means is students who would be spending 60% or more of their day in the special education classroom. And the reason for that inclusion criteria was that I wanted to be able to control more so how much technological access the students would have. So most of the time, the students that are in a setting 3 or a level 3 classroom would leave the special education classroom maybe to go to like a specialist class, lunch, or recess, at which point they would not have generally a lot of access to technology. So give me more control over being able to ensure that that is in fact taking place the way that I want it to. And then in terms of randomization, the participants in the study would be randomly assigned to either the shorter or the longer baseline phase. So a little bit more about the research design. Would take place again in the special education classroom. That classroom contains group tables, so larger tables that would sit probably up to 7 or 8 students, or 7 students and a teacher potentially, and individual desks for individual work time. It also has some bookshelves and books, a kitchenette area, a sink, a separated breakout room or a calm down space that does not have a door, so it's just an open, kind of an additional open room, and then as well has a temporary or movable room divider. People in the room: 1 special education classroom teacher, typically 2 paraprofessional staff, the setting 3 students who are in there for the majority of their day, and then some setting 1 and 2 students who go in and out for services throughout the day for about 20 to 30 minutes at a time. In terms of ethics and informed consent, permission, of course, was received from parents or guardians in order for the individuals to participate in the study. Measures for the target behavior, as I said, was peer conflict. And here I go into it a little bit with more depth, so just giving more information in terms of what that would or would not include. So name calling would be, in terms of measuring this, calling or referring to a peer by any name other than his or her given name. Frequently that includes derogatory language. Would not include instances if like a student or a participant accidentally referred to a peer by an incorrect name. So like, oh, like Sally had it, or no, I mean Jane did, or however, would not be considered name calling for this condition. Verbal aggression, verbal harassment or arguing with a peer may result in raised voices or yelling, name calling, insults, teasing peers, or the use of profanity. Engaging in physical altercations, so any attempt or actual instance of unwelcome touch, physical contact from one student with another that may or may not result in physical harm. So bruising or other marks, or it may not result in those, but it would still be considered physical altercation even if no mark was left. Stealing or grabbing, removing an item from another child, either without confrontation, so like they don't see it happen, or by force from his or her person or space without permission. And then finally, yelling, using a raised voice above a typical conversation level in response to a perceived injustice or dispute, would not include instances where the child is making a response to a preferred stimulus, so something they're excited about, and they raise their voice in excitement. Equipment needed for the study would be iPads, tablets, or Chromebooks for the reward condition, for the rewards in the baseline condition. And then for the treatment condition, any other toys or reinforcers that I would actually use first in a preference assessment, and then for use of rewards or incentives in absence of the iPads or tablets during that treatment condition. So here's the baseline phase. Participants in the baseline phase, so all 4 students, would be allowed to work for technological reinforcement and or gain access to technology break times at the discretion of the teacher or paraprofessional. So again, just kind of daily life as usual. Each participant will have an observer assigned to them, so 1 observer to each participant. That way they can really hone in and ensure that they're catching the behaviors of each individual student or participant in the study. Each participant will be observed for 90 minutes a day in the baseline phase. Observation periods will be set at random times during the day throughout the baseline phase so that all the times of the day are observed. So we're not just always observing, right away in the morning or right after lunch. It will be randomized throughout the day so that we're kind of catching different times. Observers will take data by counting instances of peer conflict behavior occurring in the 90-minute period. The data will be collected as number of instances of peer conflict per day. And I don't have it on here, but I meant to put it on here, is that inter-observer data will be used for at least 50% of the observations that occur. And then participants that are engaging in more than one type of conflict simultaneously, so if they're both yelling and grabbing something from somebody's hands, both types of conflict will be recorded during that time. In the intervention phase, this is a little bit tricky in the way that I had to think about this, especially in terms of all of the participants really sharing a space, and kind of why I went back and forth on a couple different designs, which I would be happy to share with you in the questions and feedback portion. But technology will be removed for the participants who are no longer in the baseline phase. A preference assessment for alternative reinforcers will be conducted before the end of the baseline phase, so we will have alternative reinforcement to provide them when they complete a task or when they have earned a break. Participants who are receiving non-technological breaks will have access to the preferred items, the other alternative preferred items, and will receive their break time in a separate area of a classroom so that they're not in close contact. They'd still be in the same room, but not in extremely close contact with other students who may be receiving still technological break. And the non-technological breaks will be accompanied by a staff. Participants will be notified at the start of the intervention phase that their access to technological reinforcers will not be an option for them. So the participants will be told, otherwise I think we'd just have a hot mess and lots of tantrums. The participants will continue to have an observer assigned to them. They'll still be observed for the 90-minute period of a day at random times every day for the duration of the phase. Data will be taken in the same way, so as instances of pure conflict over the 90-minute period, again, inter-observer data still taken for a minimum of 50% of the observations, and then still participants who engage in more than one type of conflict simultaneously will have both conflicts recorded. So that kind of goes through the methods in terms of my research study. I would love to get any questions, your feedback, your thoughts on if there's ways that I can improve this or something that is glaringly missing. Anything is appreciated. So thank you so much. And just the last slide is just my references. And I'm happy to provide the slide deck as well if you would like. Thanks so much.